I thought I had built something solid. 12 years of marriage, a business, a life I was proud of. I was wrong about all of it. My name is Perry Cullen. I'm 44 years old, and I run a custom tile and flooring company out of Harwick, Tennessee. Started it from scratch in a rented garage with one tile saw and a truck I was still making payments on. These days, we do residential and commercial work across 4 counties. I've got 7 employees, a good reputation, and clients who recommend me by name. I'm not a complicated man. I believe in straight talk, honest labor, and showing up when you say you will. Those are the things I thought my marriage was built on, too. My wife and I got married when I was 32, and she was 27. Her family was from Cookeville, about 40 minutes east of us. Her father, Lloyd, spent 30 years working for the railroad before his knees forced him into early retirement. Quiet man. Steady. The kind of man who fixes things instead of complaining about them. Her mother passed from cancer a few years after the wedding, and since then Lloyd had lived alone in the house he'd shared with her for decades. Keeping the yard trimmed, the gutters clean, the driveway salted in winter. He and I got along well from the start. We didn't need to talk much to understand each other. Her younger sister, Rhonda, was a different story. Not in a bad way. She was sharp, funny, the kind of person who made every room feel louder. But her marriage had been falling apart for about a year, and by February of last year, her husband had moved out. She was trying to hold herself together and doing a decent job of it on the surface, though you could see the strain if you paid attention. The request came on a Thursday evening in early April. I was in the kitchen going over a bid estimate when my wife sat down across from me, with her hands folded on the table, the way she always sat when she'd already decided something, and was just getting around to telling me. "Rhonda's been struggling," she said. "I think she needs to get away. Clear her head." "That makes sense," I said, still looking at the estimate. "I want to go with her, just the 2 of us, a sister's trip. A week, maybe 9 or 10 days. We were looking at a place in Asheville, one of those quiet inn types, hiking trails nearby, good food." I looked up then. Asheville was a few hours away. Not unreasonable. My wife had always been close with her sister, and the separation had hit Rhonda hard. "When?" I asked. "End of the month, April 26th. Something felt slightly off. Not wrong exactly. More like a note played a half-step flat. The way she'd laid it out too neatly. The specific dates already chosen before she'd mentioned it to me. The resort already researched. "You've already got the place picked out?" I said. "I've been looking around," she said, which wasn't really an answer. I agreed to it. There was nothing concrete to object to, just that flat note I couldn't quite name. I told myself I was being paranoid. Rhonda was going through a hard time. It made perfect sense. They left on a Saturday morning. I helped carry bags to the car, kissed my wife goodbye, watched the taillights disappear around the corner. Then I went inside and got back to work. The 10 days passed the way empty houses always do, slower than they should. I kept busy, took on a commercial kitchen job that needed extra hours, reorganized the storage unit, did the things around the house I'd been putting off. I called my wife most evenings. The calls were short. She sounded relaxed, a little distant. Said the inn was beautiful, that Rhonda was doing better. I had no reason to question any of it. They were supposed to come back on a Monday. They came back on Sunday, a day early, and I only found out because I happened to see my wife's car in the driveway when I pulled in from a job site late that afternoon. She was already inside, putting things away, and she greeted me with a hug that felt like something she was performing rather than feeling. Her sister had dropped her off, apparently. Already gone. "How was Asheville?" I asked. "Wonderful," she said. "Exactly what we both needed." But there was something tight about her, a held-in quality, like she was being careful. "You came back early," I said. Rhonda wanted to get home. She had some things to deal with. She moved to the kitchen and started unloading her bag, her back to me. I stood in the doorway watching her. "Everything okay?" "Of course," she said. "I'm just tired. Long drive." I let it go. I was good at letting things go. The next morning she told me she needed to see a doctor. "About what?" I asked. "Just a checkup. Blood work. You know how it is after traveling. Sometimes you pick things up without realizing it. I want to make sure I'm feeling right. I stared at her. You went to Asheville, not overseas. She laughed, but the laugh was a little too easy. I know, I'm probably being overly cautious. But Rhonda wants to go too, and she asked if I'd come with her. For moral support. You've never done this after a trip, I said. Not once in 12 years. I know. She was already moving toward the bathroom to get ready. It's probably nothing, but we're both going anyway, just to be safe. I nodded, but I picked up my phone and called Lloyd. I wasn't sure what I expected him to say, but Lloyd had always been the kind of man who trusted his gut the same way I trusted mine. And when I told him what was happening, the early return, the doctor visit, the off, feeling I couldn't shake, he was quiet for a long moment. Rhonda called me yesterday, he said finally. Said the same thing, going to get checked out. Did that strike you as strange? I asked. Rhonda hates doctors, he said. Won't go unless I drag her. Another pause. I'll meet you at the clinic. We didn't discuss what we were looking for. We just both knew something wasn't right. The waiting room at Dr. Alderton's clinic on Broad Street was half full when Lloyd and I walked in. We took seats near the back, away from the front desk. I spotted my wife's sedan in the lot. Rhonda's car was 2 spaces down. We waited about 25 minutes. Lloyd held a magazine he wasn't actually reading. I watched the clock. Then the door to the back hallway opened, and one of the nurses came out, talking quietly with a clinician I didn't recognize. Someone senior. From the look of her lanyard. They were moving fast, heads together, voices low, but not low enough. Run the same panel for both of them, since the circumstances are identical. The clinician was saying. The father, is he aware? The nurse asked. Apparently not. Same man, both confirmed. We'll need to schedule follow-ups for both within the next 2 weeks. The nurse nodded, and they separated. I sat very still. Lloyd had gone rigid beside me, the magazine still open in his hands but forgotten. He looked at me and I looked at him, and neither of us said anything for a long moment. Same man, both confirmed. I felt something happen in my chest. Not pain exactly, more like the sound a heavy door makes when it closes for the last time. Final. Sealed. Perry, Lloyd said quietly. I heard it, I said. We were still sitting there when the door opened again, and my wife and her sister walked out together. They were talking in low voices, and my wife was almost smiling at something her sister had said. Then she looked up and saw me. The smile fell like a stone into still water. What are you doing here? Her voice was careful, controlled. Same reason you are, I said, trying to figure out what's going on. Rhonda had gone pale. She looked at her father. Dad. Don't, Lloyd said. Just that one word. He didn't raise his voice. My wife recovered first. She was always faster on her feet than I was. I'd always thought that was just a personality difference. Something to admire about her. I understood it differently now. You followed us, she said. That's an invasion of privacy. I drove to a clinic, I said. I didn't break into anything. You're here because you don't trust me. I'm here because something didn't add up, I said. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you'll walk back in there right now and let the doctor share what he found. If it's nothing, it's nothing. She didn't move. Lloyd looked at his younger daughter. Rhonda, are you pregnant? Rhonda opened her mouth, closed it. Rhonda, he said again. Quiet. The same voice he'd used when she was a kid, and he already knew the answer. Yes, she said, a whisper. Lloyd sat back, like he'd been struck. He didn't say anything. I turned to my wife. And you? She held my gaze for a long moment. I watched her decide whether to keep lying, watched the calculation run across her face, watched it fail. Yes, she said, but it's not what you're making it into. We went home. All 4 of us, in 2 separate cars, back to the house my wife and I had shared for 12 years. Lloyd sat at the kitchen table without taking off his coat. My wife and her sister sat together on the same side, which told me everything I needed to know about whose team they were on. Tell me about the trip, I said. I wasn't shouting. I hadn't shouted once. I don't know if that frightened her more. We went to Asheville, my wife said. No, you didn't, I said. I called the inn you mentioned, Hemlock Ridge. The woman who answered said she'd never taken a reservation under your name. Silence. So tell me again, where did you go? My wife looked at her sister. Some agreement passed between them. Nashville, Rhonda said finally. We went to Nashville. Lloyd made a sound I'd never heard from him before. Not anger, something older than anger. Why Nashville? I asked. My wife looked at the table. We went to meet someone. Who? More silence. Who? I said again. His name is Ashton, she said. We met him online about 4 months ago. 4 months. She had been talking to this man for 4 months, while I came home every night and sat across from her at dinner and thought we were fine. Both of you? I asked, at the same time. He reached out to both of us, Rhonda said, through Instagram. He's a travel photographer. He followed us both because we have some of the same friends online. He seemed genuinely interested. He listened. He made us feel. Stop, Lloyd said. First thing he'd said since we got home. Rhonda stopped. What's his last name? I asked. Brierly, my wife said quietly. Ashton Brierly. I took out my phone and dialed the number she gave me. Reluctantly, like she was handing over something she hoped I wouldn't know how to use. He answered on the third ring. This is Ashton. Smooth, easy. The voice of a man who was used to being liked. My name is Perry Cullen, I said. I believe you know my wife. A beat of silence. I think you might have the wrong number. My wife and her sister, I said. Both pregnant. Both say it's yours. You want to keep going with the wrong number story? I don't know what you're talking about, he said. I'd appreciate it if you didn't contact this number again. He hung up. I set the phone down and looked at the two women sitting across from me. He just denied knowing either of you. My wife's expression shifted. Something cracked in it, just briefly. He's probably scared. Or he was never planning to take responsibility, I said. Not for any of this. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the garage with the lights off for a long time, just breathing, not turning anything on. My hands were shaking in a way I didn't let anyone see. 12 years. I kept running that number through my head, like it would eventually mean something different if I thought about it long enough. It didn't. I thought about every dinner, every Sunday morning, every ordinary Tuesday, that I'd taken as evidence that my life was what I believed it was. I thought about how competent betrayal is, how it wears the same face as everything else, and gives you nothing to grab onto until it's already finished. The next morning, I reached out to a former client of mine who does IT security, consulting. Quietly, professionally. Within an hour, he had a full picture of Ashton Brierly. What he found made me put the phone down and stare at the wall for a very long time. Ashton Brierly. Real name Ashton Gerald Brierly, age 41. Had a wife named Carol living in Knoxville. They'd been married for 9 years. He had a 7-year-old daughter. His Instagram had 42,000 followers. His wife's account showed a woman who trusted him completely. Proud posts about his travel work. Photos of the three of them on holidays. A woman with no idea what her husband did between flights. There were 2 other women in 2 other states who had filed and then quietly withdrawn civil complaints against him in the past 3 years. Both cases had gone cold after he disappeared from their lives. I called Lloyd and told him what I'd found. He's done this before, Lloyd said. His voice had nothing left in it. Yes, I said. And our girls thought they were special. To him. Yes. I heard him breathe for a moment. Then, what are you going to do? Drive to Knoxville, I said. His wife deserves to know. Lloyd didn't hesitate. I'll meet you at your place in 20 minutes. The drive to Knoxville takes just over an hour on a clear day. Neither of us talked much. I think we were both just trying to stay level. To hold the thing we knew without letting it pull us under before we'd done what needed to be done. Carol Brierly lived in a development near the western edge of the city. Brick, ranch houses, trimmed yards, a neighborhood where people used their front porches. A swing set in the side yard. A child's bicycle leaning against the garage. She opened the door and looked at us, and something in her face. Some quiet preparedness told me this woman had been waiting, on some level, for a conversation like this one for a long time. I told her everything. Slowly, carefully, without editorializing. I showed her the screenshots my contact had pulled. The travel dates that matched the times our wives were in Nashville. I told her about the other women, the withdrawn complaints, the pattern. She sat down in the middle of my explanation. Didn't cry, not right away. Just sat and listened with the focus of someone who was going to need to remember all of it. How many? She asked when I finished. At least 4 women we can confirm, I said. Probably more. She nodded, filing it. Thank you for coming here, she said. I know that wasn't easy. You deserve to know, Lloyd said. It was the simplest thing either of us said all day. And it was the truest. She called her lawyer while we were still there. We offered to stay. She said she'd be all right. I believed her. Some people, when the thing they've feared finally arrives, discover they're considerably stronger than the fear made them. On the drive back, Lloyd said only one thing. I'm sorry about your marriage, Perry. I'm sorry about your daughters, I said. He nodded once. We left it there. When we got back, my wife was waiting. She knew something had changed. You could see it in how she held herself, braced and still. You went to see her, she said. Not a question. Yes, I said. She closed her eyes briefly. Perry, I want you out of this house by the end of the week, I said. I'll be fair about everything. The lawyer, the finances. I'm not going to make this uglier than it already is. But I'm done. You're not going to try to work through this. I looked at her. Really looked. The way you can stop doing, without noticing after years, with a person, and I said, you went to Nashville for 9 days. You lied about where you were going. You came home pregnant by someone else. What exactly would we be working through? She didn't have an answer for that. Neither of us did. Ashton Brierley was arrested 3 months later. Carol's attorney had connected with lawyers, representing the other 2 women, and when the full picture was assembled, the fraud, the interstate elements, the pattern of deception, federal investigators took over. I read about the arrest in a news item shared by a true crime site. 6 confirmed relationships across 5 states. 3 of them involved financial deception in addition to everything else. The headline called him a serial romantic predator. It was the most accurate thing I'd ever read about the kind of man he was. My ex-wife and her sister were never going to testify against him. Even after everything. Even after he denied knowing them. Even after Carol's face in that doorway. Even after he left both of them to manage alone without a word of acknowledgement. They protected him. I stopped trying to understand that. Some allegiances don't operate on logic. The divorce was finalized in September. The house sold in October. I moved into a rental on the other side of town, a smaller place, quieter, with a good garage where I could work in the evenings. I started building things for no reason other than that it's steadied my hands. Lloyd and I kept meeting for Sunday morning breakfast at a diner off the highway. He'd aged some since the spring. We both had, but he was steadier than I expected, and so was I, slowly. He'd had hard conversations with both his daughters about choices and consequences, and what it means to use people as if they don't matter. I didn't ask how those conversations went. Some things belong between a father and his children. My ex-sister-in-law was raising her child in Cookeville, closer to Lloyd. My ex-wife had moved to Chattanooga. The man they'd flown to Nashville for had contested everything, agreed to nothing, and left both of them to figure out their situations without contributing a single dollar. Funny how quickly a man who described himself as sophisticated and worldly became invisible when actual responsibility showed up. I didn't spend much energy on anger anymore. Anger is expensive, and I'd burned through enough of it in those first months to last me a while. In late November, I was unloading tile samples from my truck outside a new client's address when a woman in a heavy canvas jacket came out to hold the door open for me. She was maybe 38 or so. Dark eyes, the kind of easy smile that doesn't ask anything of you. Contractor, she said, nodding at the samples. Flooring, I said. Custom tile work. Good. The last guy who did my kitchen laid everything slightly off plumb. Took me 2 years to stop noticing it every time I walked in. I laughed, which surprised me. It had been a while since laughing came as my first instinct. Her name was Meg. She'd bought the house from an estate sale and was renovating room by room on her own schedule, on her own terms, the kind of approach I respected. We talked about the project for 20 minutes, then about tile patterns, then about grouting narrow joints, and somewhere in there, the conversation stopped being about flooring. When I left, she had my card, and I had a genuine reason to come back. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through the county roads, where the late afternoon light was still holding. I noticed, somewhere along the way, that my hands had been steady all day. No shaking, nothing to hold down. Some losses hollow you out so completely that you wonder if there's anything left worth using. But empty rooms get refurnished, broken ground gets built on, and sometimes the life that grows up in the space where the old one fell is more honest, more solid, and more yours than anything you thought you had before. I was starting to believe that again. Slowly. The way good things always come, without announcement, in ordinary light. When you've stopped watching for them.